So to access Pivot, you go to the OGFA website, ogfa.fsu.edu, and from there go to the External Funding Resources tab, go down to Funding Databases, which will open up this list of funding databases, and Pivot is the second one listed right here. Once you open Pivot, if you've never logged into it before, you may need to set up a Pivot account. You'll do that through, with your FSU ID, your FSU email, and then it'll bring you into this sort of standard search page. And I recommend the very first thing you do is go in and set up your profile. So having an account doesn't mean you actually also have a Pivot profile, and you don't have to have a Pivot profile to use Pivot, but it's worth it because if you have a profile, Pivot will use that to push some funding opportunities to you based on your profile, and you don't even have to do anything to search for those. They will just automatically populate for you. So come in here to your profile and you can click Edit. And it'll take a second to load, but then once you get there, you'll be able to go in and add some keywords that have to do with your areas of expertise or interest. You can make sure that your current program, whatever your discipline is listed. Any languages you might know, keywords related to your research are good things to set up. And if you have publications, you can also put those in here as well, because Pivot will use the data from those to push funding opportunities to you as well. And so once you've set up your profile, you'll see over here, funding matches. These are the funding matches that are based on what you have populated in your profile. So if you click this, Pivot has suggested 15 to me. They can be a little hit or miss, I'll admit. Pivot's way of interpreting your profile and then deciding what sort of funding opportunities you fit with isn't always exact. So because I have some things relating to agricultural history in mine, I get a lot of stuff pushed to me for cottonseed research, which has nothing to do with agricultural history. But as you can see, I have Cotton Research and Development Corporation, Cotton, a couple of different awards from that organization, Cotton Textiles Research Trust. These aren't always the most relevant things, but every once in a while, in the ones that Pivot will push to you based on your profile, there are ones that fit really well, like the Frederick Douglass Book Prize is something really relevant to my field. So take a few minutes and set up your profile, very first thing you ever do in Pivot. Once you have your profile in place, the primary way you're going to interact with Pivot is through this advanced search function. So ignore this search toolbar here. Pivot is something graduate students use a lot, but it's a funding database that is also used by faculty, by nonprofits, by all sorts of different researchers, different institutions. So it has a lot of funding on here that graduate students are not eligible for. So if you just put in your search terms here, you're going to find all sorts of opportunities that are not open to you. So come over to here where it says Advanced Search and click this. And this will take you into Pivot's advanced search function, which looks like this. And I'm going to go through and describe how the different fields work and how you set up a basic search in Pivot. So first thing we're going to do is just ignore these fields at the top and come down and look at some of the other filters it allows us to either use or to disregard. The first is funder, and this refers to the actual name of a funding organization. Unless for some reason you are searching for funding from a very specific organization, it's best to leave this blank. Typically, we don't really care where our funding comes from. We're just interested in finding what's out there. So leave funder blank. Same with amount. We always say that money is money, so it's best to not set a minimum that you're looking for. Also, sometimes people think that it's not worth their time to go after the $500 or $1,000 awards because it can seem like a lot of work for a little payoff. But those small awards matter, and they can help you be more competitive for big awards later. So it's best not to set any sort of minimum amount in your funding, although every once in a while you might know that you really need $1,000 for some specific research project that you're doing, in which case you can come in here and say that you're only interested in things that are going to be more than $1,000. If you ever put something in on one of these fields and you decide you don't need it, there's this little clear over at the side, and you can click that and it'll clear that field back out for you. Deadlines functions similarly. Most cases, I would encourage you to be setting up searches that are for sort of your graduate career in its entirety and aren't for you searching for immediate funding. External funding is generally not something that has a very quick turnaround anyway. So you should always be looking for things that are coming up well in the future and planning for those. So generally, I would say leave deadline blank. Although again, there might be occasions where you know that you have something coming up that you need funding for, and you really want to have something that's going to have a deadline submission within the next 90 days, in which case you can put that filter in. But generally, if you're just setting up a general search for graduate funding for your graduate program, it's best to leave deadline blank. Limited submission means that the university overall is only allowed to submit a certain number of applications for that award. That's pretty uncommon at the graduate level. It's much more common for things that faculty might apply for, like particular federal grants will be limited to 3 institutional submissions. You can, for the most part, leave this blank and not worry about it. Again, limited submission is a pretty uncommon thing to run into with graduate funding. Applicant and institution location, you will want to put this in. I think it's easiest to not worry so much about applicant location and to instead just remember that you are a student at Florida State University, which is located in the United States. So let's just go ahead and fill in United States as the individual country here. Activity location. There's a couple of different ways you can approach this. One is if you know that you are looking for funding and you will not actually be at FSU during that time. For instance, I've worked with students who are international students and they are back in their home country and they're looking for funding. In which case, it can be best to put in where you actually are going to be, because you do occasionally run into funding opportunities that say, well, if you're not actually at your institution, if you are abroad this semester, you can't use our funding. So if you are in a unique situation like that, it's best to go ahead and put in wherever you know you're going to be during the term that you're looking for funding for. But if you're just going to be at FSU or elsewhere in the United States, you don't need to put anything else in because you've already put in that your applicant and institution location is the United States. One of the things that Pivot does that is great is allow citizenship to be more specific than just saying whether you are a US citizen or an international student. You can actually put in your country of citizenship, so it can be much more specific than many funding databases allow you to be. You can also, though, you don't have to put anything in here. You can either go with citizenship being unrestricted, which means there is no citizenship restriction for that award. That is becoming more common, although you will certainly run into funding that is earmarked either for just US citizens or just citizens of Canada or the United Kingdom or China or wherever. Unspecified means that inside of Pivot's own information about that award, there is not necessarily a specified citizenship requirement. You may well find once you start looking into any particular funding opportunity that there is actually a citizenship requirement. It just isn't part of what Pivot, the information Pivot contains about that opportunity. Funding type. Pivot breaks up their funding categories in kind of odd ways compared to some of the other databases that we link to on the OGFA website. You'll see, for instance, that dissertation and thesis funding is its own category. Fellowships and postdoctoral awards are put together as a category. Prizes and awards is a very broad and kind of vague category. Research grants is separate from scholarships, which again is separate from fellowships. So exactly why Pivot breaks it up this way, we're not very clear on. If you're really interested in a specific type of funding, it could be worthwhile to click some of these. For instance, if you know that you need travel funding, clicking travel would be really relevant for setting up your search. What's more important than putting in funding type is to come down to applicant type. And make sure that whatever else you click, you always click this one that says individuals, graduate student, or pre-doc, because that will limit it to only things that graduate students are eligible for. Just a reminder again that Pivot contains funding for all sorts of different researchers, from faculty to private researchers to people who work for government agencies, etc. So you want to make sure you're limiting it to opportunities that are open and eligible for graduate students. Now, if you fall into any of the other categories in here, any of the demographic categories or anything else, you can click those two. And the way that Pivot works is it will be an or, not an and. So it will be graduate students and women. This can get a little tricky because what it will mean if you click the two of these is that you'll come up with some opportunities that are open for women only, but those won't necessarily be limited to ones that are available for just graduate students. So for instance, you'll come up with ones that are for like early career women, but you have to have a PhD to apply for that. So that can get a little tricky and isn't always the best way to filter your options down. So for now, we're going to leave it as just individuals, graduate student, or pre-doc. Funder type is kind of like the very first question asking you a specific funder name. Typically, you shouldn't care what the funder type is. Money is coming from any type of organization, and we're happy to have it. Same with country of funder. There's really no reason to limit what country of funder you'll take money from. If you have specific reasons to do so, though, you can use this for that. The other thing you can do is come down here and exclude any of these categories. So rather than specify that there was a specific country you wanted funding from, you could exclude countries you don't want funding from, for instance. Recently added will mean that these are opportunities that have only been added to Pivot within the last 7 days, 14 days, or 30 days. If you're doing searches often and you only want to see what has been added since the last time you did a search, you can filter by recently added so that you're not seeing ones you've previously seen. But if you save your search, you don't have to do that yourself. It will do that for you. It will just show you the ones since the last time you accessed that search. I'll show you how to save searches in a moment. So typically, if you're just sort of setting up a general search for your graduate funding, you don't really need to worry about recently added because I'm going to encourage you to save that search, in which case, again, that part of it is automated for you. Now I skipped over keyword. Keyword is another one of the things that is unique to the way Pivot works. The keywords within Pivot are actually added by Pivot's own editorial team. And Pivot has its own sort of slate of keywords that don't necessarily match up with how you might think of the keywords that have to do with your discipline or your research. So what's really useful to do in this keyword box is to use it to get a little sense of how Pivot is imagining your discipline or your field. And then you can use those words up at the top in those search terms that are open to you. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's say that you are an FSU graduate student in the Department of Modern Languages and Linguistics. So here at FSU, that department is Modern Languages and Linguistics as one thing. That is not how those work inside of Pivot. If I look up Modern Languages, I see that Modern Language and Literature are grouped together. But if I look in here for anything that comes up under Modern Languages, I don't see the word linguistics anywhere. So if I'm actually a linguistics student in the FSU Department of Modern Languages and Linguistics, Modern Languages is not going to be a relevant keyword at all for words that have to do with linguistics because Pivot does not group those things together. Instead, if I search by linguistics, I see that Pivot organizes linguistics under social sciences and has its own sort of areas for linguistics. So it's worth taking some time to explore because it will give you a sense of what terms Pivot does use that, again, may not match up with the terms you actually use. Another good example of this, I think, is some of my own research dealt with ecological restoration, which is the term I saw most often in literature and the term that I use. But if I look up ecological restoration within Pivot, I see that they don't have a keyword for that. Instead, environmental restoration is the keyword that Pivot has that most closely matches in ecological restoration. So playing around in keyword here cues you in to the way that you might imagine your field being a little different from how Pivot might imagine your field, and then being able to use the keywords that are most relevant for how Pivot is going to have tagged the funding opportunities. So once you've explored keyword a little bit, what you should be doing is generating a list of both keywords that you think of working for your discipline and keywords that Pivot thinks have to do with your research. And then you'll craft a a search using a combination of those two. So I'm going to do a search now for, so I'm a student in chemistry at FSU. And so it's good. So the way these search boxes work is that the lines going across are going to be an or. So it's going to be this term or this term. So chemistry, of course, is nestled under the larger branch of physical sciences. There might be funding out there that doesn't use the term chemistry exactly, even though I'm in chemistry. It might say this is open to students in physical sciences. So it's good if you can think of a way to use the or so that you're going with both the slightly more narrow discipline you're in and the sort of broader category that that field belongs to. So for now, I'm just going to search these two and see what comes up. Okay, with that, I get 183 results for people who are graduate students in the United States or at a United States institution and are doing either chemistry or physical sciences. So 183 is actually not bad. You really could save this search and scroll through the 183 results and explore them and just work your way through them over time. And yes, I know 183 is kind of a lot to get through, but database research just is kind of tedious and just takes some time. So give yourself time to do it. And fortunately, it's the sort of thing you can do when you're otherwise a little bit too tired to be doing other heavy intellectual work of reading, writing, or engaging in your coursework. As you go through these, each one you click on will open up a sort of skeletal amount of information about that particular award. From here, you'll be able to very quickly get a sense of whether it fits with your interest and whether you are eligible for it. So you can click on eligibility, quickly read to see whether you fall into the eligibility guidelines, and you can see a little bit more of information about that particular award and see if it's a good fit for you or not. If it is, make a quick note of it and move on. If it's not, don't even make a note of it, just move on. Another couple of things you'll see in Pivot down here, if it says anticipated for the date, that means that the actual submission date for this application's deadline has not been confirmed yet. Pivot is instead projecting a anticipated due date based on historically when this particular opportunity has been due. So if I saw this one, the American Chemical Society's National Awards, and thought, this fits really well with what I want to do. I think I'm going to apply for these, but it's not going to be open until November of next year. I don't really need to worry about it right now. A quick thing you can do is click on track up here. I'm already tracking this one because I've done this search before. But if not, this wouldn't be red like this and have a flag next to it. It would say track opportunity. And if I clicked it, I would add it to my tracked opportunities. And then as things change about that, it'll be stored for you in your tracked opportunities, and you can just come back and check that specific opportunity. And you'll also be able to get email alerts when things happen, like when Pivot updates the information about this award. For instance, when it goes from an anticipated deadline to a confirmed deadline, you would get an email alerting you to that. So see, I've untracked it now. That's what it'll look like. So if you wanted to track this opportunity, you just click this right here and you would add it to your tracked ops. If you also looked at this one and thought, you know, this really well looks like the sorts of things I'm interested in. If you go to this see more ops like this, it will use that particular award to create a new search for you. You'll see though that all of your other filters drop away. So suddenly we went from 183 search results to almost 4,500 search results based on this award. So if you do that, the very first thing you're going to want to do is come back over to these filters along the left-hand side and click back down to individuals, graduate student, or pre-doc. From this award, that is still going to open it up to 1,600 awards. That's a lot to scroll through and would take you a considerable amount of time. So you can try other filters to make it a little bit more manageable for you. For instance, you could filter by some of the top keywords: health and medicine, chemical sciences, dentistry. So, you know, again, if I was actually in the chemistry department at FSU, something in dentistry is not going to be relevant to me. But it had something to do with that last award, so Pivot thinks it's relevant. Sort of the constant payoff with database research like this is The more you filter things down, the more you're probably dropping out opportunities that you would fit with. The less you filter, the more you just have to wade through a bunch of things that aren't going to be exactly relevant to you. So it's a constant balancing between how specific do you want to be in a search versus how broad do you want to be in that search, and sort of what level of stamina do you have to actually scroll through a big search result list. So I'm going to go back to my initial set of 183 results that came to me based on the search I set up. So if I thought this search was really good and was one I wanted to just be able to return to or to get email alerts about, if you click this right here where it says save search, Pivot will allow you to save this. So we'll call this Pivot Demo Search 3. Hit save. And now underneath this little home, you'll be able to go to save searches. And all the searches you've set up will just be saved there. And you can just return straight to that one. So Pivot Demo Search 3, it's right here. I have email alerts turned on for it. And how that works is if you have email alerts turned on for it, then when there are new funding opportunities that fit with those search parameters, you'll get emails from Pivot alerting you to that. They sort of come as like a weekly digest of letting you know, hey, new opportunities that fit with your Pivot Demo Search 3 have been added. So anytime you return to it, you don't have to go back and look at all 183 that have been added since that last time you looked. You only have to look at the ones that have been added since then. The other thing you can do, though, once you have a search like this, a sort of basic search setup, so this one was just chemistry or physical sciences, and it got me 183 results. You can refine that search to be a little bit more specific. So maybe I work specifically on like petroleum chemistry or nuclear chemistry or something otherwise related to energy. You can add an "and" term for energy, and that will refine that search down a little bit more. So if I do this and hit search again, I'm going to go from 183 results to now just 75 that also include energy as a term somewhere in that award description. So I could save this as a second search, and you could call it, _ energy, and save it as a new one. So now you have both a broader search terms, a broader search that fits with your discipline and your area, and a much more specific one that maybe fits with your specific area of subfield specialty. And if you keep those email alerts on, you'll get emails for both of those. So it's worth taking some time, I think, to come in and set up multiple searches that have to do with your areas of interest, with your discipline, and take the time to set those up, because once you create those searches, you never really have to do that part of it again. Okay, so that was a search for a STEM field. So I'll follow up on the example I was working with modern languages and show you how to set up a search that would be relevant if you're in that, or sort of an example of a humanities search. So what I'm actually going to do is come to my save searches and go to one that I've used before to show you what that search would look like for me. So again, I set up one here. For now, I'm going to drop the one that makes it a little bit more specific. So if you're within modern languages, right, that's the sort of broad field as it's called at FSU, but maybe specifically your discipline is French. And so you could search for either modern languages or French, because you might find that both of those terms will return, both of those searches will return results that would be relevant for your discipline, for your specific area of focus. Otherwise, again, I have my search term set up here where I have my activity location as the United States and my applicant type as graduate student or pre-doc. I haven't touched anything else. So if I run that search, I'll get 97 results. They aren't all going to be specific to exactly what I do. If I don't do anything with vernacular paleography, then that one has nothing to do with me. So 97 again is a pretty real, it's, you know, that's not a bad number to make it through. You could just scroll your way through 97 results. One little tip though, you see that there are at least 4 pages of search results here. Please go beyond page 1. A shocking number of people don't. And the way that Pivot thinks things are relevant for you isn't always going to be relevant, right? You might actually find the most relevant thing on page 4. So if you don't skip all the way to page 4, you might be missing the one thing that you really are a great fit for and you really want to apply to. So take the time to go through every page of database results when you get them. And again, the great thing about saving the search is you don't have to make it through all 4 pages in one go. You can come back, you can do just page 1 today, and then maybe tomorrow sit down and do page 2. So this was 97 results, but maybe very specifically within French, maybe I don't do anything with linguistics. My focus specifically is literature. So you could add that term as an and term and focus down a little bit more for the types of funding that might be more specific to the work you do. So now we've gone from 97 to just 22 results. And you see the one on paleography is now gone. So you can set that up that way. I'll see if I can illustrate one of the things I mentioned before, which was under applicant type, the other terms working as an or, not an and. So I know this works with the chemistry search I did a bit ago, but I haven't tried it on this one, so we'll see. So right now I just have my applicant type as grad student, but let's say women only would also be relevant for me. So if I do that, we'll see what happens. Okay, it doesn't change it. When I did it with the chemistry one, it added in one that was specifically a NSF early career research award for women in STEM. It was not eligible for graduate students. So I had, when I did my energy search for chemistry, I had something like 24 results. When I added women only as another applicant type, I had 1 additional result. So it doesn't find you ones that would be graduate student and women and have that, the conjunction of those 2 terms. It opens it back up to this or that. So just be aware of that if you add in any of those other applicant type terms, they will not necessarily be ones that you're eligible for as a graduate student. Okay, and that is how to use Pivot. Is there anything else I should cover, Henri?
Do you want to make an example for international students? Maybe kind of like the same search and then pick a country, I don't know, like Spain or maybe, they are maybe.
I could, but I didn't try that, and I don't want to do a search that's going to come up with like nothing if I focus it down.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't restrict citizenship on these. So these weren't just US opportunities.
Okay.
But we'll do that in your workshop next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the plan now was to have people practice it on their own for a while and have questions. Grace, do you have any questions?
Hello.
Hello.
For now, no.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're a prospective student, right?
Yes.
Okay. So until you are accepted to FSU and have an FSU ID, you won't be able to use Pivot. But all of these other ones on our workshop page do not require any sort of login. So you can access these at any time and use them. This fellowship finder at the University of Illinois, UCLA, Rutgers, Duke, and this international scholarships are all ones that you'll be able to access before you get to FSU.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So aside these ones, do we have any other scholarship opportunity for international students? Aside the ones we spoke about?
Yeah, here, I'll show you something else we have available that you can check out. If you go to our website, which I'll drop this into the chat real quick. If you go to this page of our website and scroll down from here, you'll see this funding booklet, Fellowships and Awards for International Students. We put this book together ourselves. It's 120 something pages of hyperlinked different awards that you can check out. So you can just scroll through here, and these are all links at the top. So if you click on this, it will take you to that awards website and you can read a bit more about it. What's your discipline or like field of study?
Public health.
Public health? Okay. So we didn't arrange this one by discipline, but you can come in here and do a keyword search. You can do like Control F within the PDF, and then you can type in. So you might find some that have public health specifically in the little paragraph description.
Okay.
There is also there's a couple I can tell you about specifically right now. So there's the PEO International Peace Scholarship, is specifically for women international students at U.S. institutions. So it's one you
Okay.
can apply for. Similarly, the American Association of University Women has a international fellowship, and here is the link for it. And then there is the this one right here, the Margaret McNamara Education Grant, is also one you might want to look into.
Okay.
And PEO, I believe you could apply to this fall. You could go ahead and apply at the applicant. So eligibility document is due by December 15th for PEO. And then the application, if you are deemed eligible, would be due, I believe, by March 15th in the spring.
Okay.
But if you got that award, you would carry it into graduate school with you. So you could have that funding start basically at the same time your program would start. So you can apply for that one before you are actually at FSU.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah. But those are ones I know about just because they're common ones. They're ones we work with a lot. But inside that funding booklet, you'll see others that I may not know off the top of my head. So take some time to look through that.
Okay, sure, I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's the workshop for today. Thanks for coming, Grace.